At 2:17 a.m., someone used a key to enter my home. Not a burglar, not a stranger, someone I trusted. By sunrise, all my security footage was professionally erased. My bank accounts were targeted, my identity nearly stolen, and the person behind it all was sitting at my family dinner table for 4 years. Tonight, I'm finally telling the truth about how a perfect marriage, a perfect daughter-in-law, and a perfect life became the perfect con. Don't look away. What happened to me could happen to you. At 2:17 a.m., someone broke into my house while I was sleeping, and by sunrise the security footage had vanished, erased with surgical precision, as if the night itself had been rewritten. I took the hard drive to a tech shop expecting nothing more than a malfunction, but the technician's face drained as he read the logs. "Sir, you need to leave here immediately." That was the moment I realized this wasn't random. This wasn't a mistake. This was personal. Before we go any further, thank you for being here. If this opening pulled you in, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. I woke to a noise that carved straight through the silence. 2:03 a.m. instinct yanked me awake before thought could form. A scraping sound, metal against wood, drifting in from the backyard of the house that had once held a life I understood. Catherine's and mine for more than 2 decades. She'd been gone for 2 years, and grief had made the house feel cavernous, hollow, too quiet. The sound came again, closer this time. Someone was out there. At 67 years old, with 40 years of investigative work behind me, I knew one truth. When something feels wrong, it usually is. I grabbed my phone. The house was still, the clock ticking, the refrigerator humming, everything normal except my pulse. Then soft, deliberate footsteps crossed my patio. Slow, measured, intentional. Not the stride of someone making a mistake, someone who knew exactly where they were. I edged back the curtain expecting shadows. Instead, everything looked unchanged except for one thing: a lawn chair had been moved. Yesterday it had been aligned perfectly. Now it was angled toward the house, the side gate slightly open, something I never left ajar. I opened the camera app and watched the night vision feed load agonizingly slow. At 2:00 a.m. nothing. 2:05 nothing. 2:10 still nothing. Then at 2:17 the gate shifted. A tall shape separated from the dark, climbed into my yard, and moved with calm purpose straight toward my back door. They tested the handle, lingered, then lifted their head and stared directly into the camera. Their face washed out by infrared, just a pale blur. Then they stepped out of frame and everything went black. Not an outage, not interference. The timestamp kept running while the video turned into a perfect void. When the image returned at 3:08, the camera was angled differently, pointed higher, as if someone had physically adjusted it. That someone had been in my yard, had touched my camera, had known exactly how to disable it. The back door showed fresh scratches around the keyhole, not forced entry. A key. Someone had tried to enter my house with a key. Someone who wasn't supposed to have one. My son and his wife were the only people besides me who had access. I didn't want to believe the thought forming in my mind. By the time I brought the DVR to Jake, a tech repair guy I trusted, my hands were shaking. His face hardened as he read the logs. "Mr. Crawford, someone accessed your system remotely using admin credentials. They didn't delete the footage, they overwrote it like a professional." Hours later, Jake recovered fragments of the footage. At 2:17 a.m., a figure climbed my fence, crossed my patio, reached my door, and used a key to my house. They entered for 8 minutes. When they emerged, they adjusted the camera, looked straight into the lens, then the screen went black. Only 3 people had a key: me, my son, his wife Isabella. The next morning the bank called about requested changes to my life insurance, $500,000, and attempts to add my son and Isabella as joint account holders. None of it authorized by me. And while I stood in that bank, I realized the truth I'd been refusing to see. This wasn't a burglary. This wasn't an accident. Someone close to me had started a process. A process that always ends the same way: a drained account, a destroyed life, and a closed case file. And I was next. Philip showed up at my house at 3:07 in the morning the next day, eyes red, hands shaking, as if he'd driven through the night without blinking. "Dad," he said, standing in my doorway in the same clothes he'd worn the day before, I think something's wrong with Isabella." His voice cracked on her name. He walked inside without waiting to be invited, packing like he was holding in an earthquake. "She's been asking questions about your accounts, about your insurance, about the house. She keeps saying you're not managing things well anymore. I thought she was just being helpful, but—" He stopped, looked at me. "She asked me last night if I'd ever considered what might happen if you couldn't make decisions for yourself. She said you might need help soon." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. The same timeline, the same script, the same language every victim had described in the cases I'd studied over my career. Philip sat at the table with his head in his hands. "Dad, I think she's planning something, and I think Kenneth's involved." Kenneth Wallace, Isabella's family friend. The estate planner she insisted was just trying to help. I placed a hand on Philip's shoulder. "We'll figure this out together." But I needed him to understand the danger. "Philip," I said quietly, "this isn't about stolen money. This is organized. There's surveillance. There's a pattern. This is bigger than family drama." He looked up, confused and scared. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying be careful, act normal around her. Don't let her know you talk to me." Philip swallowed hard. You want me to spy on her. I want you to protect yourself and help me protect both of us." Philip nodded slowly, and the fear in his eyes shifted into something else. Resolve. He left just before dawn, but as his taillights disappeared, I realized I'd lost something I could never get back: certainty. 2 days later, my phone rang. "Dad," Philip whispered, "Isabella wants me to take her laptop to get fixed. It's running slow again." My heart dropped. We had planned for this moment. "Take it to Jake," I said. "Tell him I sent you." 1 hour later, my phone rang again. "Mr. Crawford," Jake said, voice tight, "you need to get down here, now." When I arrived, he was pale, staring at the screen like he'd opened a door labeled "Do Not Enter." "Philip left less than an hour ago," Jake said softly. "He wanted me to look carefully. And sir, your daughter-in-law isn't who she says she is." He turned the laptop toward me. What I saw felt like the world dropping out from under me. Dozens of photos, Isabella smiling with different families, different husbands, different houses, different identities, file folders named Vanessa Moore, Ohio 2017-2018, Jessica Palmer, Cincinnati 2019, Isabella Crawford, Charlotte 2020 present. My lungs tightened. Jake opened a spreadsheet filled with deposits and withdrawals. "Look at the pattern," he said. "Ohio, $42,000 gone. Tennessee, $68,000 gone. Georgia, $31,000 gone. Every time the same thing. She got close. She gained access. She drained everything and moved on." Then Jake opened another folder: airline tickets, hotel receipts, rental cars, overlapping dates in multiple states. "She was running multiple cons at once," he said. Grip on the table shook. "Can you copy everything?" "Already done." He placed a USB drive in my hand, and then he hesitated. "Mr. Crawford, there's one more thing. The travel records don't match her story at all. And whoever this woman is, Isabella Crawford isn't her real name." I thanked Jake, left his shop, called my attorney, and by that evening I was sitting across from Diane Foster, who stared at the files with a grimness that told me this was far worse than even I realized. She called a private investigator, Sarah Mitchell. Together we went through everything: identities, trips, stolen assets, patterns, victims. Sarah took notes with frightening speed. Then after 90 minutes she looked up at me. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "you're not her first victim." She spread out documents: driver's licenses, police reports, bank statements, like a surgeon laying out instruments for a necessary but brutal operation. "She changes her identity every 18 to 24 months, Sarah said. Always targets older men with assets, always uses trust, charm, and relationships. And Kenneth, his name is Kenneth, it's Marcus Reeves, convicted of real estate fraud. They've worked together before." My stomach twisted. "How many victims?" "5 confirmed," Sarah replied. "Possibly more." Then she paused. "We need to contact the FBI." The next week was the longest of my life, acting normal, pretending everything was fine, watching Isabella smile at me without blinking, without flinching, without revealing the monster behind the mask. Day 17, Diane called. "The FBI wants to meet." The Charlotte field office looked normal on the outside, glass and steel, but inside everything changed. Agent Lisa Morno led us into a conference room where our evidence had been transformed into a full investigative board: photos, diagrams, red string connecting everything like a spider web. "Mr. Crawford," she said, "what you uncovered is part of something we've been investigating for 18 months. My heart pounded. 6 confirmed victims, 4 states, over $3.2 million stolen. Your daughter-in-law is part of a 5-member fraud ring, and you are the 7th target." She told me everything, their methods, their patterns, their victims. Then she slid a small device across the table, a wire. "We need you to wear this," she said. "Get them talking. Invite them back into your house." I understood what she wasn't saying. I would be bait. "It's dangerous," she warned, "but it's the only way to stop them." I looked at the folder of scripted lines, questions, triggers designed to make criminals talk. I thought of the other victims who never got justice, and I nodded. "Tell me what to say." 2 days later at 7:00 p.m. sharp, Isabella, no, the woman pretending to be Isabella, walked into my house with Kenneth, ready to finish what they started. And they had no idea the FBI was listening. Kenneth spread the papers across my coffee table with the polished confidence of a man who had done this many times before. Power of attorney forms, beneficiary amendments, trust restructuring documents, every sheet designed to funnel my life's work straight into their pockets. Isabella sat beside Philip, her hand resting lightly on his knee like she'd spent years practicing that exact gesture in front of a mirror. Everything about her was controlled, calculated, measured. But tonight I wasn't the man she'd studied. I wasn't confused. I wasn't compliant. I wasn't alone. The FBI was 2 blocks away, listening to every breath. I followed the script Agent Morneau had drilled into me, slow, calm, curious. "Before I sign anything," I said, letting my voice tremble just enough, "I want to understand your family better." Isabella's smile tightened. "Of course, Daniel, what would you like to know?" "Your family in Tennessee," I said. "You've never talked much about them." No accent, no details, and when I asked you about places in Knoxville, you didn't recognize a single one. A tiny crack flickered in her expression, a hairline fracture in a perfect mask. "I've been away for years," she said, too quickly, too smooth. Philip's head snapped toward her, confusion, fear, doubt. "Isabella," he whispered, "what is he talking about?" I didn't look away from her. I pulled out my phone and tapped the folder Jake had prepared. Her photos appeared, image after image of her with people neither Philip nor I had ever seen. Different houses, different families, different lives, different names. Her breath caught just barely. "Tell him," I said softly. "Tell him who you really are." "This is inappropriate," Kenneth snapped, rising from his chair. "We came here in good faith." "Sit down, Marcus," I said. He froze. Philip looked at him, stunned. "Marcus? Who's Marcus?" Kenneth's jaw tightened. "What did you call me?" "Marcus Reeves," I repeated. "Your real name, not Kenneth Wallace." I turned back to Isabella. "And you, how many names have you used?" "Vanessa Moore in Ohio, Jessica Palmer in Cincinnati." "How many families?" Philip stood up, stepping away from her as if suddenly burned. "Isabella, tell him he's wrong. Please tell him he's wrong." Her lips pressed together. Her eyes went flat, cold, empty, her true face. "You're being paranoid," she said, but her voice had lost its warmth, stripped down to something metallic. "Your father is confused." "Then explain the 6 families," I said. "Explain the $2 million, explain the laptop." She stayed silent. So I said the name Agent Morneau had given me hours before the meeting, the name she'd spent 12 years burying. "Alina." The room froze, Philip's breath caught. Kenneth's shoulders tensed. "And Isabella, no." Alina looked at me with a hatred so sharp it felt like a blade. "Who told you that name?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The house exploded into motion. The front door burst open. "FBI, hands up." Agents flooded my living room in seconds. Alina bolted for the hallway but didn't make it 3 steps before she was surrounded, wrists yanked behind her back, steel closing around her. Kenneth tried for the back door. 2 agents took him down in the kitchen. Philip stood frozen, watching the woman he'd loved for 4 years get handcuffed like she'd been waiting for it. Alina didn't beg, didn't cry, didn't deny a thing. She just stared at me with dead, calculating eyes, already searching for the next angle, the next weakness, the next lie she could weaponize. As agents dragged her outside, Philip turned to me. His voice cracked open. "Dad, did you know? This whole time, did you know?" I opened my mouth to answer, but Agent Morneau stepped between us. "Your father saved your life," she said firmly, and probably the lives of 6 more families. Philip looked at Alina being pushed into the back of an FBI vehicle, then at me, then back again. His face collapsed. I need, he couldn't finish. He walked out the door without looking back. They had been caught, but as my son drove away, broken all over again, I didn't feel victory. I felt the weight of everything we had survived, and everything we had yet to repair. I watched the agents pack evidence boxes into vans, watched neighbors stare from porches, watched the pieces of my shattered life being labeled and logged. And in the middle of my own living room, with police lights flickering across family photos on the wall, I realized something that ripped straight through my chest. Catching the criminals was the easy part. Healing my son would take far longer. The courtroom smelled like old paper and polished wood, the kind of place where truth felt heavy. Philip sat beside me, stiff in his suit, eyes hollow but steady. 6 weeks had passed since the night Alina Voss was taken away in cuffs, but the damage she left behind still lingered in the corners of our lives like dust you could never quite wipe clean. When the bailiff called her name, she was led into the courtroom in shackles. No makeup, no charm, no lies left to hide behind. And still somehow she managed to look dangerous. Not because of the cuffs, not because of the charges, but because she didn't look afraid, not even a little. She scanned the room until her eyes landed on Philip. For a flicker, half a heartbeat, there was something like recognition. Then it vanished, replaced by that cold emptiness I remembered all too well. Philip looked away first. The trial moved fast, too fast. Like watching a house collapse in slow motion while the judge read decades of destruction in a calm, even tone. The prosecutor laid out the evidence. Photos, bank transfers, travel records, fake identities. 8 victims in total, 2 more had come forward since her arrest. 1 man dead, 1 couple bankrupt, 1 woman living in her daughter's spare bedroom after losing everything she'd ever saved. And then there was Philip. Not financially ruined, but emotionally gutted. A man who had built a life with a ghost wearing a stolen name. Alina watched it all with the detached curiosity of someone observing a storm outside a window. When the prosecutor listed the total amount she had stolen, over $3 million, she didn't flinch. When the victims testified via video call, crying, trembling, begging the court to protect others from what had happened to them, she blinked once. When Philip took the stand, her gaze sharpened. He spoke quietly, every word heavy. "I loved her," he said. "Every day for 4 years I thought she was the person I would build a future with, and she used that love to hurt my family." His voice cracked on the last sentence. Alina tilted her head, studying him as if he were still a puzzle she hadn't fully solved. When it was over, Philip stepped down from the stand and sat beside me, breathing hard. "You did good," I whispered. "You told the truth." "It didn't feel good," he murmured. "It felt like burying something." The verdict came back guilty on all counts. Alina Voss showed no emotion, not anger, not regret, not fear, just emptiness. Like the verdict was merely an inconvenience on her calendar. Like she'd already started planning the next move she'd make 12 years from now when parole became a possibility. When the judge sentenced her, his words were sharp as glass. 15 years. No parole for 12. The courtroom was silent. Alina didn't look at the judge, she looked at Philip. She held his gaze for several seconds, her expression unreadable. And then, for the first time since I'd met her, I saw something on her face that wasn't confidence or calculation. I saw irritation. As if Philip's existence, his pain, his testimony, was an inconvenience to her plans. She broke the gaze when the marshals took her arms and led her through the side door. The sound of the locks clicking shut echoed through the courtroom like closure. But closure was what Philip felt. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed us. I told them only one thing: my son and I are still standing together. And then I got him home. For weeks after the trial, Philip barely spoke. He slept in his old room, sat at the kitchen table long after his coffee had gone cold. Some nights I heard him packing the hallway, grief rattling inside him like loose bolts in a machine. Healing wasn't linear. It wasn't fast. Some days were good. Some days left him staring at nothing for long stretches of time. But life has a way of slipping back into the cracks once disaster recedes. Sarah helped. Her kindness, her steady presence, her refusal to treat him like something broken. She dragged him slowly back into the world. When they came to dinner one night, laughing softly at some private joke. I felt a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in years. A quiet reassurance that the past hadn't destroyed him. It had reshaped him. 1 year after the trial, the house felt peaceful again. The shadows in the corners were just shadows now, not memories lurking. Catherine's roses bloomed in the front yard. Russell still brought coffee every morning. Jake upgraded my cameras twice just in case. The support group grew from 8 people to 12, then to 16. Stories filled that room every Tuesday, stories of betrayal, survival, fear, resilience. And always, after someone new finished speaking, Dorothy would say the same thing. Shame belongs to the predator, not the victim. One afternoon, I received a call from Agent Morno. "We've uncovered 4 more victims," she said. "From years before we had any record of Alina's activity. Your case is helping them come forward." I hung up the phone and sat at Catherine's desk, staring at the sunlight on the floorboards. 4 more people who thought they were alone. 4 more who finally found the courage to speak because they'd heard what happened in my house. I opened Catherine's journal and wrote, "Pain shared becomes warning. Warning shared becomes protection. Protection shared becomes purpose." The FBI asked me to speak at a national elder fraud conference, then asked me to appear in a training video for law enforcement. Thousands of officers across the country would hear my story, learn the patterns, understand the tactics. I had spent my life investigating fraud. I thought retirement meant the end of that chapter. I was wrong. It was the beginning of a new one. A year after Alina was sentenced, Philip and I sat on the back porch watching the dogwoods bloom. "Dad," he said quietly, "do you think I'll ever trust myself again?" "Yes," I said, "because you already are." He looked at me confused. "You chose the right woman this time," I said, "and she chose you without manipulation, without lies, without conditions." He breathed out slowly. A weight lifted. "Yeah," he whispered, "I guess I did." For the first time since everything happened, Philip's smile reached his eyes, and in that moment I realized something important. Alina hadn't destroyed him. She forged him, strength through fire, clarity through betrayal, wisdom through survival, and me, I wasn't the same man either. I listened to my instincts now. I guarded my boundaries. I taught others to do the same. And every time I spoke at a senior center, every time someone came up afterward and said, "Your story helped me," I felt Catherine beside me, steady, proud, reminding me that surviving wasn't the end of the story. Surviving was the responsibility. One evening, after a speech, an elderly man approached me. "You saved my home," he said. "Because of your story, I asked my daughter about some documents she was pressuring me to sign. Turned out she didn't understand them either, but we got a lawyer involved. You saved us from a mistake." That night driving home, I realized something. Alina's greatest weapon had been silence, shame, isolation. But I had broken that cycle. And now my story was being carried into living rooms and police stations and family conversations all over the country. My scars had become someone else's shield. And I knew then, without doubt, that this was no longer a story about what was taken from me. It was a story about what I chose to give. Survival, awareness, community. And the one truth I wanted the world to remember: trust is not weakness. Vulnerability is not a flaw. And age is not an open invitation for predators. We fight back. We speak up. We protect each other. And we do not stay silent. 1 year after the trial, I realized that the real ending to this story wasn't inside a courtroom. It wasn't in the sentencing or the headlines or even in the relief people expected me to feel. It came quietly, the way truth often does, in the soft hours of an ordinary morning as sunlight crept across my kitchen table. I was reviewing paperwork for the conference in Washington, practicing the speech I'd deliver to hundreds of officers, lawyers, and advocates. I thought I was preparing to close a chapter, but as I read through the details of my own case, the security footage, the timelines, the financial records, I understood something that I hadn't been ready to admit until now. This didn't end with me. It began with me. My story wasn't the conclusion of a crime. It was the beginning of a movement. Survivors across the country were speaking up. Law enforcement was finally being trained to recognize patterns of deception they'd overlooked for years. Communities were forming support networks. Families were learning to ask questions before signing documents. Elderly men and women were no longer suffering in silence, no longer believing they were foolish or alone. And in the center of all of that, somehow I stood. Not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Because someone needed to be the first voice in a room full of silence. That morning, the doorbell rang. Philip stood there with Sarah beside him. He looked different now, not broken, not fragile, grounded, steady. "Whole, Dad," he said. "We wanted to talk to you." They stepped inside. Sarah was holding something small wrapped in a blue cloth. Philip nudged her gently. "Show him." She unwrapped it, revealing a tiny pair of baby shoes, soft, white, new. My breath caught. "We wanted to tell you first," Philip said. "Before anyone else, you're going to be a grandfather." Something inside me finally broke, not in pain this time, but in a release so powerful it left me gripping the back of a chair. After everything we had survived, the lies, the betrayal, the fear, the surveillance, the courtroom battles, life had given us this, a new beginning, a future untouched by Alina's shadow, a life she never got to poison. Sarah smiled gently. "He wanted you to hear it in this house," she said. "He said this is where the healing started." Philip stepped forward and hugged me. And for the first time in a long time, the embrace wasn't desperate. It wasn't heavy. It was hopeful. When they left that afternoon, I sat back down at Catherine's desk and opened her journal to a fresh page. My handwriting was slower now, steadier. "Catherine," I wrote, "he's going to be a father, and he's choosing love again, real love, honest love. You always believed he'd find his way. You were right." I closed the journal and walked to the back porch. The dogwoods were blooming. The air was warm and clean, carrying the smell of fresh soil and spring wind. I thought about everything I'd learned since that night someone tried to unlock my back door with a stolen key. I thought about how easily silence could have ruined us, and how choosing to speak, choosing to fight, choosing to trust my instincts had changed the trajectory of not just my life, but dozens of others. If you're listening to this, remember what I learned the hard way. Your intuition is not paranoia. Your boundaries are not obstacles. Your voice is not too small. Your age is not a weakness. And your story, your lived experience, may be the shield that saves someone else. Healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about choosing not to let the pain define you. It's about reclaiming what was stolen and rebuilding what was broken. It's about standing back up with clearer eyes, steadier hands, and a louder voice. Tonight, when I turn off the lights and head upstairs, my house will be quiet again. But it's not the same silence as before. This silence is peace, not fear, strength, not vulnerability, renewal, not loss. Because the people who tried to break me didn't understand the kind of man I was or the kind of community I'd find. They didn't understand that survival isn't the end of the story. Survival is only the first step. The real ending is choosing to live again, choosing to trust again, choosing to love again. And now, as I look toward the future, with a grandson on the way, with my son healed, with thousands of people finding courage through these words, I know this story didn't end in my living room or in a courtroom. It ends here, in hope, in strength, in continued vigilance, and in the promise that no matter how dark the night becomes, I will never ignore the sound of footsteps in my backyard again.